Let me ask you a question. Do you think Abigail in the Bible was a pick-me woman? Welcome back to a new episode of Woman Meets Bible. And today I'm doing a voiceover, as you can see, and I'm really glad that you can join me. So today's video will be actually about Abigail in the Bible and whether or not she was a pick-me, and also what so many preachers get wrong about Abigail. Now, at first glance, there might seem to be some similarities between Abigail and the pick-me woman. After all, she did approach David with flattery and praise. But as we dig deeper, we'll actually see that Abigail's actions were far more complex and strategic than many modern day preachers give her credit for. And as a matter of fact, her actions were actually way darker than you can imagine. Now, many preachers actually misinterpret Abigail's story and they overlook many crucial aspects. Some preachers talk about Abigail as simply a submissive wife who was stroking David's ego, and this narrative fails to account for Abigail's strategic wisdom and self-preservation instincts. Now, some preachers also see Abigail's marriage to David as a reward for her submission, which oversimplifies the complex dynamics at play in Abigail's story. Some downplay Abigail's spiritual discernment, but don't forget that Abigail was able to identify David as the future king. So how did she do that if she had no spiritual discernment or prophetic abilities? Also, there are preachers who see Abigail as a passive player, a wife, instead of a woman who actually actively shaped her future. What's worse, there are preachers who actually see Abigail as, how do you put it, a disobedient wife for going behind Nabal's back, and they view it as disobedience instead of wisdom and courage. So in this video, I'm going to really dig deep into the psychology of Abigail and why she's a lot darker than many people or preachers give her notice for. Now, picture this. David, Israel's future king, is living as an outlaw. He's hiding away from King Saul. He's wandering in the wilderness, and he was doing so with 600 men. It was a very harsh existence, but David, though desperate, clings on to his dignity. For a time, he and his men were protecting the sheep of a wealthy man by the name Nabal, and they didn't ask for anything in return. You need to understand that back in those times, sheep was wealth. People sold sheep. People used sheep's skin to make cloth. Sheep was wealth. One day, David made a simple request of Nabal. He asked for food, a gesture of goodwill that he thought would come easily from a man whose wealth he has protected, a man who has benefited from David's protection over his sheep. But Nabal's response is not just cold, it's a personal insult. Nabal says, "Who is David? Who is this son of Jesse? Shall I take my bread and my water and my meat and give it to men whom I do not know where they are from?" Let me ask you a question. If this happened to you, how would you react? Comment below. I'd love to hear your thought. Because David's reaction is explosive. His pride was already fragile from being a fugitive, and he was deeply wounded. In his rage, he prepared to kill Nabal and his entire household. And here's where the story takes an unexpected turn. Abigail, Nabal's wife, writes out to meet David, a man who she knows has plans of killing her entire household. It's a really bold move, one that showcases her courage and strategic thinking. But guess what? She has a plan. Come with me to the book of 1 Samuel 25. I'll read from verse 23 to verse 35. It says, "When Abigail saw David, she quickly got off her donkey and bowed down before David with her face to the ground. She fell at his feet and said, 'Pardon my servant, my lord, and let me speak to you. Hear what your servant has to say. Please pay no attention, my lord, to that wicked man Nabal. He is just like his name. His name means fully, and fully goes with him. And as for me, your servant, I did not see the men my lord sent. And now, my lord, as surely as the Lord your God lives and as you live, Since the Lord has kept you from bloodshed and from avenging yourselves with your own hands, may your enemies and all who are intent on harming my Lord be like Nabal, and let this gift which your servant has brought to my Lord be given to the men who follow you. Now, let's take a pause here, because she said, let this gift which she had brought be given to the men who follow David. What gift did she bring? We're going to turn here to the book of 1 Samuel. 1 Samuel 25. If we go in the book of 1 Samuel 25, right? Give me 1 second here. If we go to verse 18, it says, Abigail acted quickly. She took 200 loaves of bread, 2 skins of wine, 5 dressed sheep, 5 seahs of roasted grain, 100 cakes of raisin, and 200 cakes of pressed figs, and put them on donkeys. And she did not tell her husband Nabal. Now the food that Nabal refused to give to David, Abigail loaded extra food and took it to David. Listen, the Bible says 200 loaves of bread, 2 skins of wine, 5 dressed sheep, 5 seahs of roasted grain, 100 cakes of raisins, and 200 cakes of pressed figs. And she told her servants to go along with her, and she'll follow them. She had servants. And then she continued, we see in verse 28 of 1 Samuel 25, she says, please forgive your servant's presumption. The Lord your God will certainly make a lasting dynasty for my Lord, because you fight the Lord's battles, and no wrongdoing will be found in you as long as you live. Even though someone is pursuing you to take your life, the life of my Lord will be bound securely in the bundle of the living by the Lord your God. But the lives of your enemies he will hurl away as from the pocket of a sling. When the Lord has fulfilled for my Lord every good thing he promised concerning him, and has appointed him ruler over Israel, my Lord will not have on his conscience this staggering burden of needless bloodshed, or of having avenged himself. And when the Lord your God has brought my Lord success, remember your servant. That is very, very key. Remember your servant. We're going to come back to that, but let's continue. In verse 32, it says, David said to Abigail, praise be to the Lord, the God of Israel, who has sent you today to meet me. May you be blessed for your good judgment, and for keeping me from bloodshed this day, and from avenging myself with my own hand. Otherwise, as surely as the Lord, the God of Israel lives, who has kept me from harming you, if you had not come quickly to meet me, not one male belonging to Nabal would have been left alive by daybreak. Then David accepted from her hand what she had brought to him, and he said, go home in peace. I have heard your words and granted your request. This is a woman who is married, who goes to a man and says that her husband Nabal is wicked and a fool. And she says, don't forget your servant once God makes you ruler over Israel, when God has brought you success. Don't be fooled. This is no simple tale of a dutiful wife saving her foolish husband. Abigail is playing a far more intricate game. Abigail is putting herself before her family. She's trapped in a marriage to a fool, even if he's wealthy. And she's seen an opportunity, a chance to align herself with the man destined for greatness. Even though David was an outlaw, Abigail was able to see his potential. She knew what God had called him to do. And she used one stone to kill 3 birds. Bear in mind that she had moved fearlessly by going to meet a man who planned to kill her family. God helped her. She did not die. Then when she got there, she pacified his anger by praying for him, saying that God would make his enemies as foolish as Nabal. Kind of putting herself apart from her husband Nabal, saying, I'm not like him, he's a fool. She took the food there. She kind of removed herself from that situation. This is a Nabal thing, this is not a me thing. She prayed for David, saying, God will take him to that place that God has promised him. And by doing that, she's able to calm him down. She sees him calming down, then she says, and when God brings you success, do not forget me. This woman uses one stone to kill three birds. She saves her family, reminds David of his destiny, and plants a seed in his life that will later on make her the queen. So when she speaks to David, she speaks to his self-esteem. She praises him and appeals to his sense of destiny. This is a masterful display of subtle manipulation. And I'll explain later on why I call this manipulation. But it's also a survival strategy. Abigail is fighting for her family and her future, while putting herself in David's mind as a woman worthy of being remembered. And it's really good to think about it though. How did she know that David was going to become the king if it wasn't for prophetic insight? And how did she know that he was not going to kill her if not for courage? There are many things in the story that I think is deeper than just a woman ego stroking a man. When Abigail's actions, it might seem so self-serving, but I think it reminds us of an important truth that sometimes we must take the bold action to change our circumstances. But we must always consider the consequences of the things that we do, because everything has sometimes implications. We also need to understand Abigail's cultural context. See, women in ancient Israel faced numerous challenges and limitations. This was the same cultural context that allowed Laban to deceive Jacob by giving him Leah in marriage instead of Rachel. And Leah had no say in that situation, having to marry a man she did not even know, not even have loved that much. But her father said so it was so. Women often had to navigate treacherous waters to secure their future and safety. And this gave birth to wise women like Abigail, but it also gave birth to women who were evil like Jezebel. And the more I read my Bible, the more I feel like many women of this ancient era actually displayed many tactics. This goes deeper than the story of Abigail. Even Abraham's wife Sarah used her own manipulative tactics to get what she wanted. I made a video called 5 Biblical Relationship Tricks that Sarah perfected. I'll leave a link in the video description below if you want to check that out and see how these powerful women compare. But continuing on with Abigail, in Abigail's case, she found herself married to Nabal, a man who is described as a wealthy person, but also as a fool. And I think this by itself is a big lesson, because money is important, but money doesn't always make the man. Nabal's wealth couldn't compensate for his lack of wisdom and his insulting behavior towards David. Abigail's approach to David wasn't born out of a desire to simply stroke his ego or gain his approval at the expense of other women. It was a calculated move to save her household and potentially secure a better future for herself. Abigail saw David's potential as a future king, and she acted accordingly. She wanted to move from being with a wealthy fool to being with a wealthy king. And Abigail's plan worked. David's anger fades and he spares Nabal and his household. But the story doesn't end there. When Nabal learns of what happened, the Bible says his heart failed him and he died 10 days later. And David, what did he do next? He sent for Abigail to become his wife. Now, let's contrast this with the modern day pick-me. Because when they mention Abigail as a submissive wife, a woman who knew how to stroke a man's ego, what they are describing in the modern day world will actually be what we call a pick-me woman. And we need to contrast Abigail with the modern day pick-me. Modern day pick-me's try to emulate Abigail's approach, but they often miss the mark entirely. A pick-me typically seeks male validation by putting down other women and excessively praising men. And they might think that they are following Abigail's wisdom or blueprint, but they are missing crucial element. I've seen a few people who think that what they're doing is wise. And when you ask them, why are you doing this, they'll say Abigail did it. But no, Abigail was far wiser and was in a situation that was way worse than what is going on today. Abigail understood power dynamics. She wasn't seeking approval for approval's sake, but she was maneuvering the societal constraints that were there in that time to improve her situation. A pygmy is often acting out of insecurity, seeking validation through superficial gestures and through self-depreciation. Abigail's words to David were also not empty flattery. She appealed to his sense of destiny and his better nature. Let me ask you a question. If God is telling somebody, a man, something right now that the man does not want to hear, do you think a pygmy will say that? Or do you think a pygmy will say what the man wants to hear? David probably might not have wanted to hear what she was saying, that God would not want him to kill people. But it could reason with what she was saying, that this is actually going to be a consequence of this action. And he decided to not do it. This shows Abigail's level of insight and courage. And I think she was able to really pacify him by not pointing fingers, like, how dare you plan this, but also by praying for him. You'll get to that place you are going. God will help you, but don't do this thing you want to do. Now, it's important to know that the Bible often shows us imperfect people being used for God's purpose. Abigail, like many other Bible figures, was not perfect. Her actions might seem manipulative to modern eyes, but they were born out of necessities of her time and situation. David is also not perfect, being a person that wanted to kill an entire family because he was refused food. And Nabal was definitely not perfect, given the folly he displayed in this situation. You see, there are many stories from the Bible as it pertains to women that I think many preachers do not get right in their preaching. Many preachers will tell you that Vashti in the Bible was a defiant queen, and Esther was a woman of virtue. What if I told you that Vashti was actually a virtuous woman, and Esther getting to the throne is far more complicated and shocking than you might imagine? Now, if you're ready to uncover that story, the hidden layers, the intrigue, and the power struggles, put a comment below and I'll make a video about that. And that video will shock you. Now, back to Abigail. While Abigail's actions might superficially resemble those of a pygmy, her wisdom, strategy, and courage set her apart. I think our story is mostly teaching us about the complexities of power, the need for wisdom, and the ways in which people can act with agency even within oppressive systems. So, I hope you enjoyed this psychological exploration of Abigail and her role in the Bible. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell. And before I leave, I'm going to leave you with something. In a world of manipulation and power games, the line between survival and exploitation is thin, and sometimes it's hard to tell where one ends and where the other one begins. But let me ask you this question. In the game of power is always being played. That is a given. And in this game of power that is always being played, my question for you is, are you the player or are you the piece? So, don't forget to subscribe, put the notification bell on. I'm really happy I could make this video and talk to you guys again. It's been a while. And feel free to stick around with me. There's way more videos coming down the pipeline. And I'm really excited for the journey together. Happy holidays, and I will see you soon.